Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
The Christmas Truce, what really happened in the trenches in 1914. I vaguely remember this from history lessons. That, they took a little break for Christmas, not to fight. I think that's what happened, but let's see.
In 2016, IWM was contacted by the family of one of the soldiers shown in this photograph. We now know that this is Arno Bohm, a German soldier standing alongside British troops from the London Rifle Brigade. They're standing together in the middle of no man's land during the Christmas Truce of 1914. This photograph captures a moment so unusual in the First World War that many people at the time, and to this day, believed it to be a myth. In the midst of a brutal, total war, how did this momentary peace come about? What impact did it have in the course of the First World War? And why did it never happen again?
That was kind of crazy. If people would come together for one day, why couldn't just come together for life?
We were in the
because they
front
have
line.
to share.
We were about 300 yards from the Germans, and we had, I think, on Christmas Eve, we'd been singing carols and this, that, and the other, and the Germans had been doing the same, and we'd been shouting to each other, sometimes rude remarks, more often just joking remarks. Eventually, a German said, "Tomorrow, you no shoot, we no shoot."
At the start of the war, many believed it would all be over by Christmas. However, by December that year, it was obvious that this was not the case, and thousands of families and soldiers were facing a Christmas of separation, grief, and hardship.
So those soldiers who were in the trenches over winter 1914, the conditions would have got gradually worse and worse. You got a lot of rain, a lot of frost, and the general living conditions would have been terrible.
But the British troops were not alone. In the trenches opposite there,
Now,
sometimes
this
only
makes me really believe that the Germans really respect Christmas, and the British do also really like Christmas too.
Yeah, but the Christmas is a big deal in Europe. I can't speak for the whole states. As I said, here in Miami, it's hot. The vibe is not the same. I would like to experience.
You're just a Grinch.
No, I would like to experience Christmas where it snows. Different, maybe it's different. Maybe it's more like Europe. But yeah, compare this to Europe, we're like 10 times more Christmas vibe than
here. Were
here.
you in Massachusetts during Christmas?
No, I left before Christmas. I left early. But that's different though. I was in school. It wasn't the same.
The grass is always greener.
What do you mean?
Because you're like, I need Christmas for it to snow. And you left in Massachusetts.
I need Christmas for it to snow, excuse me?
Yes. Because you're like,
I need Christmas for it to snow.
It's not Christmas if it doesn't snow. But you're in Massachusetts. Were you there doing Christmas in Massachusetts?
It snowed though. On the last day as I was leaving, I was going for... No. But
exactly.
I was leaving, it did snow though. Snow.
But you left to Lithuania for the snow, right? Is that where you went? Or did you come to Miami?
I went to Arizona and then to Miami.
You're a fraud. A fraud.
30 yards of...
How exactly?
Because then I would have thought you would have went to Lithuania.
For what?
For the snow, for Christmas.
It doesn't really snow on Christmas in Lithuania. What's your point?
So why do you need the snow for Christmas?
It's just the vibe. It feels different.
How do you know this
It's
vibe?
hot. Like I want cold.
How do you
It's
know
fucking
this vibe?
hot.
How do you
I
know
go
this
outside
vibe?
in the
You
t-shirt
said
and
in
shorts.
Lithuania,
It's Christmas. It doesn't make
there's
no
no snow in
sense.
Christmas. So how do you know the vibe? Where you pick up this
Occasionally,
vibe from?
sometimes maybe
I
like
thought-
once every 5 years it would snow.
Okay.
Whatever. Still cold. It's just different mood.
away across the strip of no man's land were German soldiers in the exact same situation.
There was lots of opportunity for each side to communicate with the other. And this was a regular thing which happened right from the start of trench warfare. But communication would often be in the form of soldiers from one side shouting over insults to those in the other trenches. But what was interesting at Christmas is that both sides actually started to communicate more friendly terms. It really began with the Germans singing Christmas carols and setting up Christmas trees on top of their parapets. And so they came to very much empathise with one another.
I remember
You
very
know,
well Christmas.
honestly, I would think when it's like a holiday and the other side becomes more relaxed is the better time to actually win the war you're fighting.
I agree, but
Because Haitian Independence Day falls on New Year's.
because the other party was chilling and
I don't know.
Haitians
It looked
said,
like
"Oh,
we gotta push all the way through.
I remember
That's different though. The thing is, in your case, y'all fighting for freedom. These people, they don't even know what they're fighting for, honestly.
But what they fighting for?
Exactly, they don't even know. They're just shooting at each other. I obviously I wasn't there. I would think if the soldiers in the trenches, they're shooting at each other because somebody told them shoot that way, and they're just shooting. I don't think they know why. It's just a job.
This was for World War One.
Yeah. They're probably high out of their mind because what I heard, they gave them drugs too, like so they don't feel nothing. So they don't know what they're doing. They're just shooting at one another. For what reason? They don't know. They don't care. That's their job. In your
and
case,
also, is there young people too? They're young too because they said young.
Yeah, they don't know any better. In your case, they want for their freedom. That's different. They're fighting for themselves. They're not fighting for themselves. They don't know.
And it was quite risky because it's the first nation to have its freedom. So that's like you don't see anybody else do it, and you're the first to do it. It's very risky.
Christmas Day, when the German and the French soldiers left their trenches, went to the barbed wire between them with champagne and cigarettes in their hands and had
They look quite
feelings of
young.
fraternization.
They were
and
young.
shouted
They were
they
teenagers,
wanted to
probably.
finish the war. And that lasted only 2 days, 1.5 really. And then strict order came that no fraternization was allowed and we had to stay back in our trenches.
The Christmas truce varied in different parts of the front line. Ceasefires were hastily arranged, sometimes to enable the collection and burial of bodies or to allow the trenches to be repaired. In other cases, the soldiers simply enjoyed fraternising with the other side.
And we shared pies, goodies with the Germans. And then from somewhere, somehow,
But I wonder how they understand each
it
other.
was a proper football. But we didn't
They had like a translator?
It wasn't team in any sense. It was a kitchen house. Everybody was having a go. It came from their side, and it wasn't from our side very much.
I who took this photo?
Taking part in it. Well, I should think there'd be at least a couple of hundred. Did you think of all? Oh yes, I think about it. I was pretty good then, 19.
But while some parts of the front line were playing football and swapping stories, others were confused by what they heard or felt no inclination to socialise with those they had so recently been fighting.
Yeah, it's weird.
After a few moments,
I can imagine.
there were
I think it's weird, but then you drink a little alcohol, you become friends with everybody. So.
That's true.
lighting objects raised above the German
Because
coast.
at the end of the day, they're all humans. They're all the same. As I said, they don't even know what they're fighting for. They're there because somebody. They can relate in that sense that they're only there because somebody sent them there. Really. So
The Germans were shouting over to our trench. There's no doubt about that at all. And before we could take any action or do anything, we were ordered to open rapid fire, you see, which we did. The Germans did not reply to our rapid fire. They simply carried on with their celebrations and were having a very fine time indeed. They certainly were not going to do it anymore. They thought that we were idiots, I suppose we were. Well, not us, but the command, you see.
The way that trench warfare was organised in the First World War, each sector was very distinctive. And so you wouldn't necessarily know what was happening in the sector next door to you. And you do get stories of one area of the front where they're experiencing a truce, but then suddenly they get fired on by the troops in the next sector who don't realise what's happening.
For those soldiers not involved, the truce must have seemed unbelievable, and even more so for those back home. For months, the media and government propaganda had shaped the perception of German soldiers as bloodthirsty enemies, baby eaters, devils, ruthless killers. But news of the remarkable Christmas truce soon spread abroad. By the end of December, letters and photos arrived home, and newspapers began to publish accounts of the truce.
My father was delighted to have them giving us a description of events, and he sent them up to the Daily Telegraph. I got him to fight for writing. That showed up that it must have been me who wrote it, and he must have given me an overlisting now, from daring to write to the press. But of course I didn't. My old man wrote to the press.
These photographs were taken on personal cameras that some soldiers had taken with them into the trenches. Photography in the trenches.
wow, back then personal cameras were available. Wow, I wouldn't have thought so. I thought it was only very expensive, only for like the newspapers, that stuff. Wow, I didn't know that.
Discouraged for obvious reasons, but during the Christmas truce of 1914, soldiers on both sides of the trenches could not resist the opportunity to document such a unique event.
At the beginning of January 1915, the newspapers suddenly start printing these letters. And to begin with, there was a certain amount of disbelief. But then, over time, suddenly photographs started to appear as well. And by that time, the evidence was clear that this did happen. It wasn't a myth. And the media at the time absolutely loved it. There were lots of discussions in the newspapers about whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. And, you know, in a way, it's a wonderful snapshot of Christmas
I
1914.
never heard of this. That's pretty cool.
I do remember this vaguely, as I said in the intro. I didn't know like the details in it, but I do remember that this kind of thing did happen. I have heard of it.
Students were still slightly naive because the war had only really just begun. You find that in 1915 and onwards, the war becomes almost a much more serious endeavour.
The Christmas Truce would come to be remembered as something of a blip in the regular conduct of the war. It conflicted with the patriotic aggression required by both sides. It also served to highlight the great contrast between war and religion. How can you fight a war of aggression while also celebrating Christmas, the traditional time for peace and goodwill? For those reasons, the Christmas Truce was increasingly seen as unimportant and awkward to fit into the standard narrative of the First World War.
You never get anything like the Christmas Truce happening again, and over time, not only is it seen as an anomaly, but almost as a myth. And it gets to the point where people are actually doubting whether it happened in the first place, which continues, you know, right up to this day. So there's still a lot of confusion about whether there was a football match played and things like this.
We didn't cross to France until March of 1915, but although it would be arrogant to say that the thing didn't actually take place, I very much doubt whether anything of the nature or magnitude that had been claimed for it took place at all. Now, the purpose of that barbed wire in the trenches was to keep each side in its own place. Therefore, why would anybody try to break that? And if anybody tried, what were the NCOs doing? What were the officers doing? I think the whole thing borders on the fairy tale and may be classed with the Russians with snow on their boots and the angels of Mons.
We know by looking at...
So I assume that account was for somebody who doesn't believe in it? Because it sounded like they're denying it happened?
German newspapers, that Christmas Truce was covered there in a very similar way to how it was in Britain. In the 1920s and the 1930s, you see definite examples of how the Christmas Truce changes in its depiction because there was a much greater emphasis then on the German soldier as a hero fighting a noble war, whereas the Christmas Truce conflicts with that to a degree. So in Germany in particular, the Christmas Truce goes out of favour definitely in the 20s and 30s, whereas in Britain it continues to be a popular, celebrated story as part of the First World War.
The letters
I'm
and
surprised they
photographs
don't
of
make
each
this
in
into a
Britain.
movie.
Well, maybe there is a movie, I don't know. Maybe that's why I know it, maybe I've seen a movie about it, I don't know. I don't know.
Confirmed that this remarkable event had indeed taken place, but it was one that was not to be repeated.
The Christmas Truce was unique, and nothing like it happened again to that scale. And the reasons for this are varied. Immediately after the truce, the high command of both sides stepped in to make sure that fraternization and ceasefires like this would not happen in the same way. But also, in the long term, the real reason that truces like this didn't happen is that the war changed in the way in which it was being fought. As the war progressed, there's a more centralised method of command. Those in the front line would have been forced into constant aggression. You would have had artillery and trench mortar units constantly going. And also, of course, as the war progressed, it took a far nastier turn. So you get things like gas warfare introduced, an increasing number of civilian casualties. You also get incidents like sinking of the Lusitania. The temptation, I suppose, to empathise with the enemy and the desire to fraternise with them changed dramatically from 1915 onwards.
Ooh.
Interesting.
It can be argued that the Christmas Truce made little difference to the course of the First World War, but it would be remembered as a crucial moment.
Yeah, I would think such a moment would have kind of ended the war. People clearly don't want to fight each other. They're there because that's their job. You have to be there, but
Must have been awkward the next day.
Yeah. Like, we drink one day, the next day I kill you.
Yeah.
History. The truce is featured in films,
But as I said, I do think, they drugged them out of their minds so they didn't really know what they're doing.
television programs, inspired songs, and even featured in adverts. It's become part of the symbolism used when discussing the First World War, as synonymous with that conflict as poppies, mud, and war poets. This unique event has become legendary, in part because the idea of peace at Christmas in such an unlikely place is an irresistible story. But its enduring legacy is also due to these incredible photographs and the interviews from those who were there, documenting an event that to so many still seems wholly unbelievable.
And I can't tell who's on whose side. They all look the same.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting though.
What?
I'm not saying this didn't happen, but with all the technology nowadays, you know, for kids learning it now. You know, back then when we learned it, you know, in the 2000s, where the technology wasn't this, you kind of, you know, it did happen, you believe it, that's it. Nowadays, all that shit can be generated with, you know, computers. So how do you know it's true and it's not generated images? You know, it's kind of crazy to think.
I think they did the best they possibly could because they had a person who was like there to speak kind of on the experience.
No, I believe it happened. I learned about it. I don't, you know, I'm not debating the validity of it. I'm just saying, you know, hypothetically speaking, like, because a lot of people nowadays, you know, they're saying moon landing is fake too. Like, they're starting that everything is fake, you know, and they're same flat earthers, I'm sure, you know, the earth is whatever. So it's just interesting as a, you know,
that's why it's important to have fact checkers.
Yeah.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible.